Good evening, Gills fans. Welcome back to Gills in the Blood TV. Hope you are still all staying safe. I'm back tonight with part 2 of my mini-series, Gills by Position. If you've been looking at the channel over the last couple of days, the first part was goalkeepers. So tonight we shall crack straight on with defenders. My top 5 selections in the time that I've been watching the club, plus honourable mentions, and there are plenty tonight. This was a bit tougher than the goalkeeper section. So we'll get straight into it. First player coming up on your screen arrived in 1997, and that is this man. Barry Ashby, probably Tony Pulis's first signing, or one of his first signings, sorry, as part of his first rebuild after winning promotion from League 2, or what was the old Division 3 back then, in 1995-96. We then consolidated for a couple of years, didn't we, or a season or so in what is now League 1, 96-97, and then 97-98. We started to try and push up the table and try and get ourselves involved in the race for promotion. And Barry Ashby joined 1997 and went on to make over 300 appearances for the club in a 6-year stay, and yeah, was a proper defender. I think that's a word I like to use, proper. You look at defenders now and they have to be able to play, but back then when Barry was coming through and was at his peak, defenders were defenders. You let your midfielders and your attackers go and do their thing at the other end of the pitch, but defenders back then, their first job was to make sure that the opposition didn't score goals, and whether it was winning balls in the air or crunching into tackles or just generally having battles with anyone that he come up against, he'd stand toe to toe against anyone, and he was a proper old-fashioned centre half. Yeah, they don't really make defenders like him anymore, do they? A proper throwback. If you look at the competition that Barry had to see off in his time at the club, first wave was Guy Butters, Adi Pennant, Matt Bryan, all really good centre halves in their time, but he remained a constant. It seemed to be that one of them would play with him rather than he would have to compete and try and dislodge any of them. Chris Hope then arrived a little bit later. Darren Carr was a decent defender in his own right, but spent most of his time as a substitute during his time in Kent. That's just a few. There was others as well. But yeah, from 97 to 2003, Barry Ashby made at least 40 appearances in all competitions per campaign, which says all you need to know about him, his ability, his fitness levels. Like I say, didn't miss too many games, but he played the game the old way, and that was if there was a player there to be kicked and a ball to be won, it didn't matter whether he was getting the ball first or the player. Barry Ashby was making sure that he was getting both. He'd go through everything. Proper old-fashioned warrior. Played a huge part in them 2 seasons when we got to Wembley in back-to-back years. Obviously heartbreaking the first, and it looked like it was going to be heartbreaking the second. It was him that conceded the penalty, a soft one on Darren Sheridan, which was tucked away, I think, by Stuart Barlow to put Wigan in front. But we all know what happened at the end of that game. First Steve Butler and then Andy Thompson with headers sent us into dreamland and to the promised land of the Championship. 57 appearances in that promotion season as well from Barry. Absolutely first class all the way through. I remember 2 big goals in that campaign as well. There was one in an FA Cup. This is the FA Cup run where we got to the quarter-finals, if you remember. Scored the second at home to them Premier League Bradford City to put us 2-0 up. And I think they pulled one back through Dean Saunders before John Hodges' deflected effort sealed the game for us, and set up a tie with Sheffield Wednesday, which we'll talk about maybe in further episodes of this mini-series. There's a clue to one that I might have picked later on. But another one was the second leg of the playoff semi-final, after we managed to get ourselves back to 3-2 late on in the away game at the old Victoria ground, I think it was. Was that the name of Stoke's old ground? Barry scored one of the 3 in our 3-0 win at home to the Potters in the second leg, which sent us back to Wembley for the second consecutive season. And a mad game. I think they finished with 9 men in the end, didn't they, Stoke City that night? But it was still on a knife edge right up till the end, because I think we were still only a single goal in front. But Barry clinched one of them, which ultimately helped us get back to the Twin Towers. Yeah, like I say, proper old school centre-back, plenty of games, plenty of battles, plenty of memories, and as I've already mentioned, they don't make defenders like Barry Ashby anymore. But my next one is someone that I have already mentioned, and he arrived in the summer of 2000, just after we'd been promoted into, what was it, Ensley League Division 1, I'm going to go with that, or Nationwide Division 1, which is now the Championship, and that is this man coming up on your screen. $250,000 for Chris Hope from Scunthorpe at the time seemed like quite a lot of money, but if you look back now and what he did for the football club in them Championship years, an absolute steal. Probably one of the best $250,000 that Paul Scally spent in his time at the club, and just didn't really remember Chris Hope ever having a bad game when he first arrived. I remember the first game was at home to Stockport County in the first division, and Guy Butters put us 1-0 up, and then, to be frank, we got comfortably beaten, and we had to learn collectively how to play at that level, and we did. We learnt very fast, but Chris Hope was a mainstay of that side for the first 3 years in the now Championship, and played over 170 consecutive games after joining, before missing a game through suspension in 2003. So from the summer of 2000 to the till 2003, so the best part of 3 years, he didn't miss a single fixture in a Gillingham shirt. And I think it's no coincidence that during that period, when he didn't miss a game, we finished 13th, we then finished 12th, and we then finished 11th. 3 highest finishes in the history of the football club, and Chris Hope didn't really miss a game through all of them campaigns. So says all about his ability. Became one of the first names on the team sheet after joining. It quickly became apparent that, similarly to Barry Ashby, he was a proper old school defender. He'd head it, he'd win it, he'd kick you, he'd kick anyone. He'd run through a brick wall for the team. Slotted seamlessly into that side. Remember, this was a squad that Tony Pulis had built, and Peter Taylor then come in and started adding to it, didn't he, to make us a slightly different way we played. And then Hesse took over in the summer of 2000 once we got promoted, because Peter Taylor left to go Filbert Street and take over at Leicester City. But Chris Hope was just a proper Gillingham footballer, an absolute battler, an absolute warrior. Never knew when he was beaten, but he had ability as well. But he was a man that you'd want in the trenches with you if you had to go to war. And just really enjoyed watching him. I know Boz, I think, states him as one of his favourite players of all time, and he's right up there for me as well. If you look up here, that is my table plan on the wall from my wedding, and Chris Hope is on that, as is Barry Ashby, so no coincidence. But yeah, one abiding memory of Chris Hope. I think it was his second goal for the club in that first season. Put us 1-0 up against Norwich City, of all teams, who are now battling to avoid the drop in the Premier League. And his goal plus a hat-trick from Ifeanora put us 4-0 up, absolutely cruising after 52 minutes. And then, very unlike us at the time, for a side that had Chris Hope types in it and Barry Ashby types in it that was hard to beat, we decided to concede 3 in the second half, and ended up clinging on for a 4-3 win. I can only imagine, if we'd been around doing the YouTube channel at the time, what that would have been like, looking at people's reactions around us. It would have been heart-stopping and nail-biting, I'd imagine. But we got the job done just about. But yeah, a weird scenario. But aside from a goal in a crazy game, Chris Hope was so much more than that. A proper defending defender. Again, another sort of throwback type to your Tony Adams players of the 80s and the 90s. Brought up on watching proper defenders and playing under old school managers. But yeah, really good for Gillingham Football Club, and played a huge part in what was probably the best 3 seasons this football club's ever had. Eventually left in 2006, I think. So I had 6 good years with the club before leaving. That brings us on to our next defender, who actually still plays for the club now. In fact, 2 of my last 3 picks still do. That is this man coming up on your screen. The Benjamin Button of the current Gillingham squad. First arrived in January 2008 as a 24-year-old. Excuse me. Barry Fuller we're talking about. And he's still going strong as ever now at 35 years of age. And if you want to see anything about his application and his desire to keep fit, if you're on Instagram, go and look at his Instagram story if it's still on there from a couple of days ago. It might have disappeared, unfortunately, but there's a new challenge going around at the moment while we're all bored and self-isolating, which I'm not taking part in. I took part in the press-ups challenge, as many as you can, but there's a new one going around amongst pros and semi-pros. 1,000 press-ups in an hour, and Barry done it with 17 minutes to spare, give or take a few seconds, I think, which is beggar's belief for me. To do 1,000 press-ups, it'd take me about a month. I think that'd be 10 a day, or no, that's appalling maths. It'd take me ages anyway. But yeah, as I say, originally joined in January 2008. Couldn't prevent us from sliding back into League Two under Mark Stimpson, who was his manager at Stevenage, which is where he came from. But started off the next season really well. And come October, he was club captain at the age of 24. Everything seemed to be going really well, didn't it? We were battling to get into playoffs, trying to get promoted, and Barry was playing a huge part in that. Then he got suspended for a red card, come back, and then, somewhat more worrying, contracted pneumonia in the January of 2009. And I think if you pick up that sort of illness as any sort of regular human being, that's season over for definite. But not Barry. Barry was back within 5 weeks playing, and we all know what happened in May of 2009, and it's something I mentioned yesterday when I discussed Simon Royce. Simeon Jackson takes all the plaudits for that day, and rightly so, because he scored the winner. And generally that's what happens. Strikers get more of the praise because they do a job that's more visible, I suppose. But in the same way that I discussed Simon Royce yesterday, we have to remember that back four, which was Barry Fuller, Gary Richards, Simon King and John Nutter, were absolutely immaculate, and they were shielded really well by a couple of midfielders in front of them. Josh Wright as being one, a very young Josh Wright. We won 1-0, and Barry, at 24 years of age, lifted the trophy, the playoff trophy at Wembley, as we got promoted back to League One at the first attempt. After that, he had a couple of years where he was in and out the side because of injury, and he got released in the summer of 2012, the year Martin Allen took over, ironically enough. And if he'd stayed on, he could have ended up winning promotion from League Two with us again. But he went to Wimbledon, and he had a fabulous few years there. And then, somewhat surprisingly, June, July, summer 18, it was announced that he was back. And we all said at the time that we thought he was going to be back up to Luke O'Neill. It's not Barry's way, is it? He bided his time at the start of the season. I think we started the season with Bradley Garmston at left back and Luke O'Neill at right back. We then had changed things around in the autumn, and I think Barry's first game was Portsmouth away in the October. We won 2-0. Barry was absolutely brilliant playing at left back on the wrong side, and you're keeping some good League One players quiet in that Portsmouth team, the likes of Ronan Curtis and whoever else they had at the time, Jamal Lowe. It just got better and better after that, didn't he? He went on to comfortably win Player of the Year in 2018-19. I had a great drink up with him, with Bars and Stocky, and plenty of others at the Player of the Year do. Drunkenly sang his song with him, which was quite fun. And Danny Kedwell as well, I might add. And a load of fans that were all pretty inebriated, I can't even say it, drunk, there we go, at the time. And this season, he's carried on where he's left off. He's played 35 times this year, I think, and 79 games he's played in the 2 seasons since he came back, which for someone who 90% of the fan base probably thought was going to be a backup is incredible. And he's now approaching 200. No, he's just gone past 200 games, I think, for the club, hasn't he, recently, before everything stopped. So, incredible achievement, a playoff winner, a promotion winner, and an old school defender in the modern game, I think. Still getting up and down, still causing opposing fullbacks problems, and still kicking opposing wingers up in the air. Barry Fuller, an excellent defender and an excellent servant. From him, we move on to another centre-back who we didn't see for too long. He arrived in the summer of 2014 on a free transfer, and he's now plying his trade in the Premier League. That is this man. Sheffield United and Republic of Ireland international John Egan, one of Peter Taylor's best signings. And I think if you talk about Peter Taylor as a manager later on, not after 2000, I mean 2014-15, when the football was pretty turgid, let's be honest. But he knows he can find players. He just struggled to get them into a team in a cohesive unit. But John Egan, probably one of his very best. Free transfer. And he played 92 times in 2 seasons for us, scoring 11 goals, which is pretty decent return for a centre-back. Was captain during 2015-16. Getting away from the old school centre-backs that I've already talked about, like Barry Ashby and Chrissy Hope. He's now that modern generation that has to be able to defend, but has to be able to play as well. 2 good feet, can play the ball out from the back. And yeah, was skipper in the side in 2015-16 under the late Justin Edinburgh, where for 2/3 of the campaign we dared to dream again and thought that we might be able to get back to the promised land of the Championship, and it wasn't quite to be in the end. It all fell away. Last third of the season especially, I think we went 8 games without winning at the end of the season, and it was a heartbreaking end to a campaign that on the whole had been absolutely superb. We played some brilliant football. We had a great mixture of youth and experience, and John Egan played a huge part in that. And I think it's no coincidence that his and Bradley Dack's injuries at a crucial part of the running ultimately cost us. But yeah, for 2 years he was one of the best in League One, and he then went on to Brentford via Tribunal, and then moved on to Sheffield United, where I think he's now captain in part of their back 3, where they play with overlapping wing backs. Sheffield United side that's chasing European football, which is absolutely staggering. He's a regular in the Republic of Ireland side now. Yeah, just a really, really good modern day centre half, who unfortunately we didn't keep for long enough. But such is the way of the world when you're a League One side and you have to keep making money to stay afloat. We had to let him go, and he's continued to flourish, first at Griffin Park, like I say, and now at Bramall Lane under Chris Wilder's guidance, and he'll continue to get better and better. And he was a brilliant signing for us, and one that I do keep an eye on now. Right, final pick is the second player that's still in the current squad. He is our captain. He is German. He's a brilliant defender, and that is this man. Max Ehmer, gone past 250 club appearances now, and in the modern game, where contracts mean generally very little, I think that's an excellent achievement, regardless of whether that's Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, non-league. To play that amount of games for the same football club says that, number one, you have to be a good footballer. Number two, you have to be well liked within that football club. And I think Max Ehmer's both. We spoke to him for the channel back in 2017. He's a really nice fella, really approachable, was really happy to chat, very family orientated. I think at the time he just had the first baby, or was due to become a father for the first time. I think he's got 2 now, so he's getting towards his own little 5-a-side team, which is great. But yeah, generally been really, really good. Arrived originally on loan in the autumn of 2014 under Peter Taylor again. Can pick a player, I said that. And yeah, settled in pretty quickly in a side that was struggling. We know that. We was battling relegation up until the Gang of 4, and then Justin Edinburgh came in the winter of February, and we flourished towards the end of that campaign and finished 12th. And Max Ehmer played a huge part of that alongside John Egan. And yeah, we had quite a strong core of that defence, didn't we? When he arrived, we had them 2 plus Stuart Nelson in goal. Was a solid base, which ultimately helped us stay up pretty comfortably. But we signed him on a 3-year contract in the summer of 2015, and he played 33 times in that season under Justin Edinburgh, whether it was as part of a back 4 or part of a back 3/5, either with Deji Osalaja or John Egan, or both. And as I've already mentioned, we were absolutely superb for probably 35, 40 games until the wheels fell off spectacularly. He then became captain in 2016-17 when Adi Pennant took over from Justin Edinburgh after he was sacked with us in 18th position in League One. And I was quite honest with him, and he was quite honest with me at the time when we spoke. And I said I thought it hindered him. I thought his performances dropped off quite considerably when he took the armband, and he said that it was something that he probably didn't want at the time, and it was tough in a side that was really struggling. And every time he cleared the ball or made a tackle, it felt like it was coming straight back to you. And it was just really good to get an insight into a professional footballer's head and mindset. And you can almost understand it a bit more now, rather than just doing what we all generally do, and that shout from the terrace in or the stands on a Saturday or a Tuesday. And boy, am I missing doing that. But yeah, Gabby Zakuani, I think, is a player that Max has alluded to in improving him. Said that he learned playing next to Gabby for about 2 seasons to become a defending defender, and just learned that defending was his main job, and he had to do that first and foremost, because he's got 2 good feet, Max. We know he can play. We know he can bring the ball out of defence. And again, like John Egan, different types of centre-backs now compared to Barry Ashby, compared to Chris Oak, compared to Darren Carr, A.D. Pennant, Guy Butters that I've mentioned. But yeah, I think he's become a better defender over the last couple of years. He's got better with age. And this season, I think, has comfortably been his best for us. He's got to be in the running for player of the season. Whether it stops now, we do get it done eventually at some point once this horrible COVID-19 passes. Organiser, leader, doesn't scream and shout like your old school type captains, I don't think, but he knows when to talk to players, when to give them a bit of a telling off, when to put the proverbial arm around him. And I think he's really helped Jack Tucker this season settle into our back four. And yeah, like I say, 250 appearances, one of the older heads, one of the veterans, one of the leaders, one of the experienced members of that squad now. And he scored a few good goals for us as well. I think one of my favourites, especially live, would be under Peterborough a couple of years ago. Took the ball on his chest like a centre forward, got it out on his feet with one and drilled it under. I think it was Jonathan Bond, our ex-loan keeper, who was in goal for Peterborough at the time. And it was only a 1-1 draw, but it was a huge point for us against a good posh side. And I think there was a bit of a pitch invasion, which potentially was a bit over the top, but it was good fun. And there was a bit of a bundle in the corner between the Raynham End and the Gordon Road stand. But he scored some other good goals. I think Doncaster last season, touch on his chest, swivels, bangs it in the far corner with his right foot. Scored a set piece against Colchester a couple of years ago in a checker trade game. So he's got ability for a centre half. He's played centre midfield as well, if you remember, a few games. Went in there, played as centre midfielder as a youngster. Went in and played anchor role for us a few times when we had injury problems, and was really good at the base of a diamond under Steve Lovell, I think it was. And yeah, got to be in the running for player of the year, like I say. One of my favourite players at the moment. Mr. Consistency. I think he's only missed about 15 minutes this season, and that was the end of that Wimbledon game when he had to come off with a dislocated shoulder. But I think it says all about Max Ehmer's character now that 7 days later, Stadium of Light, he leads us out, puts in another magnificent performance as we drew 2-2 in what was the final game of football that I've seen. Anyway, that's enough from me. That is my top 5. I think I've already mentioned a few of my honourable mentions. There's plenty of really good defenders that I've seen live down the years. Richard Green, A.D. Pennant, Guy Butters, Mark Patterson, Nyron Noseworthy, Roland Edge, Ian Cox later on, Simon King, immaculate, like I said, in that playoff final of 2009 and that season before an ankle injury unfortunately pretty much ended his career. Joe Martin, got a lot of stick recently is off Gills fans because he moved to Millwall, but played a huge part in that 2012-13 season when we won League Two. So plenty of good names. And like I say, I'm looking forward to hearing the more veteran members of the Facebook page, the YouTube channel and Twitter to give me names going further back. Steve Bruce is obviously a name that we all know all about. Went on to play for Manchester United, but I never saw him play live. There's going to be loads of others which I'm looking forward to hearing about. As always, get involved down there on YouTube. Speak to us on Twitter. Comment on Facebook when it's up. And we'll be back in a couple of days with part 3, which will be midfielders. But until next time, stay safe, keep following them guidelines, and up the Gills.